Hey everybody. It's funny. I love presenting case studies, but for the same reason, it's challenging to find cases that a client would let us talk about or let me talk about on a stage. And this is a case, the one I'm talking about today, and I'll obviously share some more details about it, that I've been waiting to present for a while, and I determined that enough time has passed, and I've modified the details enough so that it will not be traceable back to the actual victim here. But I think it is instructive. Hopefully you guys will find it instructive. A couple of things to note up front. Unlike most of the other, if not all of the presenters in this seminar, at least as far as I know, I am not an IT security professional per se. I'm a lawyer. Even though I left practicing law in 2002 and have been working in the area of cybersecurity and doing incident response work for 15 years or so. My background is a little bit different. But this case that I'm going to talk about today involves, this is a case that members of my team worked. I run a cybersecurity consulting business, and one of the things we do is incident response and forensics. And so this is a case that my team worked on. And it's one of those cases that has stayed with me, and I think will stay with me as long as I live for a few reasons. One, it just is one of those cases that had everything, and I don't have sufficient time to get into all the details today. But it's also, it's stuck with me because, and this is spoiler alert, I guess, we never figured out what happened. And so I refer to this case as my white whale. It is the one that I will be chasing the rest of my life. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I came across a piece of information that sent me scurrying back to my notes and files from this case because I thought maybe I'd figured it out. So that's the other reason I'm here today. I'm hoping somebody will solve this for me. I'll buy you a beer. So please come up to me afterwards if you figure it out. Other than hearing a good story, what I hope is a good story, why was I invited to present here today, and why should you pay attention? So what I learned, that when I look back and look at what I learned the most from this case, it was really about how human tendencies and just human weaknesses and frailties can affect an incident response and affect everybody involved. In fact, affect everybody involved in an incident response process without them realizing it. And that can be a serious problem. It can lead you to waste a lot of time, which is something is always at a premium when you're doing IR work. It can lead you down paths that are just unproductive and frankly could get you into trouble. I would say the times that I've had people on my teams violate the law accidentally, it's always an IR, and it's always when they get excited and they think they figured the whole thing out, and they go and basically access someone else's computer, right, looking for a piece of evidence. And a lot of times they find it. These are what one of my ex-FBI friends introduced me to the concept of. There's something in between legal and illegal activity, and it's called non-prosecutable activity. And that's where a lot of this stuff lives, right? So these are things that may technically be against the law, but no prosecutor's ever going to go after you for it. But anyway, we have to, as incident responders, we have to be aware of how our human tendencies can get in the way. And certainly, obviously, they can help us as well. So, what are some of those tendencies? One, we want certainty. We want black and white. We want right and wrong. We want, this server was accessed or it wasn't. Right, and that is so rarely available to us in these incident response scenarios, but we are constantly trying to nail something down as either it happened or it didn't happen. We have a tendency to overemphasize or give more credence or weight to pieces of evidence that support our hunches and what we think happened, and we ignore things that point in another direction because it just complicates things for us. And we don't realize we're doing it, but we all do it. And then we spend a lot of time trying to get into the heads of the attackers. And sometimes that's useful to a point, but most of the times it doesn't really matter. It's a waste of time, and it can lead you in directions that you really don't want to go. So those are some of the weaknesses that I've recognized. So what are my objectives with this session? I want to talk a little bit more about the limits of what you can accomplish with computer forensics, with doing DFIR. I want to warn everyone against the lure of false leads and premature conclusions. Recognize the influence of some of these human tendencies. I am going to talk about law enforcement. We worked heavily with law enforcement in this case, as we do in a lot of our cases. And it's not a straightforward process. There's a push and a pull, and it's another one of those things where you've really got to make sure you understand your objectives and what you're trying to achieve by going to law enforcement. Because law enforcement, obviously they're well-intended. They do want to solve a case, but their objective, their mission, the way they are measured is, how many people do they put in jail, period. And most companies, most victims of cyber events, do we really care whether someone goes to jail? It might feel good, but we don't really care. We just want it to stop. We want to understand what happened. We want certainty. And so we've got to understand where those interests might diverge and create issues. So I'll talk a little bit about that. We will talk about the challenges of engaging with an attacker in real time during an event. Which is something that doesn't happen a lot, but when it does, aside from some of the ransomware examples, yes, that's a form of interaction, but the more sort of nuanced communications with attackers, where you're trying to get information, not share too much information, it can be a very challenging situation and full of risk. And then finally, give people a sense of the impact that a major IR event can have on an organization overall, outside of the IT and IT security area. So I have created a hypothetical client here to use. Obviously, I'm not using the real victim's name here. It's a little bit of a composite of other matters that we worked, but 80 to 90% of this is from this one case. So our victim is a U.S.-based publicly traded marine products manufacturing company. Get it, White Whale? I don't know how. It's sort of late in the afternoon. Pequod Industries. Any Melville fans out there? All right. Well, I enjoyed creating the slides. So U.S.-based publicly traded marine products manufacturing company, 20,000 employees, 10,000 contractors, 6 countries, 50,000 hosts on the network, right? So big company, not massive, but big company. Highly decentralized IT management, and I'll spare some of the details here, but basically that's a euphemism for, horrible hardware and software inventories and abominable access controls on pretty much all their hosts, right? So that's the euphemism I chose to use in the slide here. They did have an MSSP providing 8x5 network security monitoring, fully outsourced SOC, so they had very limited capabilities and expertise in-house. They were relying on a third party. And then the legal department did have a law firm on retainer, as many companies do, to assist with privacy matters, mainly data breach, PII type breach matters. So we'll sort of refer back to some of these facts as we go along. Okay, so the game begins here. So this is a message that obviously I created for this purpose, but it is very, very close in terms of tone and other things to the message that was actually received. So I will read it aloud for everyone here. So this is from the sender is harpooned@hmail.com. Everybody remember HMA mail? I know we all miss it. And it was sent to Carl A. Habertson, who's the CEO of Pequod. And the subject is time for some payback. Ahoy, congratulations on your Q4 earnings, very impressive. I'm sure your board and investors are very happy with the tremendous financial success of the company. But as we all know, it doesn't take much for things to take a turn for the worse, especially at Pequod. I have some information that could sink your company fast, but don't worry, I'm not planning to put it to use as long as you do what I ask. Attached is a small sample of what I have. Rest assured, there is a lot more where that came from. I'm sure you don't want this stuff to show up on WikiLeaks. I will be in touch soon with instructions for you to follow. Have a great day. Not likely that Carl's going to have a great day. Okay, so what do we notice about this message? For people who've done IR work, and by the way, when we got the call for this matter, it came in through the law firm. We were engaged through the law firm. You know what the lawyer told me it was? Ransomware. We got a ransomware case, right? And honestly, I was kind of like, oh, another one? Do I really want to work another ransomware case? And so I said, okay, great, let's get on a call, let's talk about the details. And they shared this message. I was like, that ain't ransomware. That's just ransom. That's blackmail. This is like old school stuff. So very, very exciting for those of us in this business. So what are some of the things that the seasoned IR people, it's probably too many people for, I was going to do a little, shout it out, but I think the room's too big for it. So I'll sort of go through. Anybody who really wants to shout something out, please don't hesitate. But what are some of the things you notice right away? So, they're using HTML, okay, so they're at least, smart enough to try to use something that is going to disguise their identity. How about that grammar? Really nicely constructed message, right? So suggests that this is probably someone who's a native English speaker, probably someone in the United States, given some of the grammar here. It also is kind of weird that it refers to current events at the company, right? This is somebody who's aware of or paying attention to the financial results of the company. That's sort of unusual, right, in this context. How about that subject line? Time for some payback? What is up with that? That's definitely unusual. A reference to the company not being able to withstand bad publicity. So again, it suggests some knowledge, some personal stake somehow in this company. But what's the most bizarre thing about this message? WikiLeaks is also weird, right, to mention it in this context. But the weirdest thing is, what do they want? They're not asking for anything, right? They're just shooting a message out, and so that's unusual in this certainly in the ransomware world, but generally in these sorts of sophisticated attacker events. So what do our human brains start doing? We start putting these things together, and what's the conclusion that you come to? If you had to guess as to what kind of attacker was behind this, what would your guess be? Insider. This like screams insider, right, of some kind. Current, former employee, disgruntled, contractor, who knows, right? So, somebody who really has some inside knowledge. So there was an attachment that went along with this message, so there was an audit report. And by the way, this is a PDF. Okay, so this is another sort of level of sophistication here that the attacker had, and they didn't attach actual files that you could use hashes and make it much easier to go find them. There was a PDF with images, screenshots essentially, of a number of different documents. And one of them was an audit of a manufacturing process, that had some finding, it had some negative findings, some issues, but, nothing horrible was in that. 3 slides from an internal PowerPoint deck analyzing a proposed acquisition. Again, not public information, but nothing that was all that, crazy or serious, or certainly wouldn't embarrass the company. And then finally, stock grant and employee compensation information for the entire company. Okay, so that's sensitive, but if you look at the legal side, does any of this information create a data breach as defined by U.S. law? Probably not. GDPR is a different story, but this is pre-GDPR, so we'll leave that out of the discussion for now. Honestly, and this isn't actually the information that was exposed, but very similar in terms of the level of sensitivity in the matter. And I will say that the reaction of the executive team at the company when they saw this was kind of like, meh, not just if this is all I got, right? We're not all that worried about it. What if you look at this set of documents, what jumps out to you about that, other than the fact that it's kind of weird? Like, you would think that if someone had full access to the entire network, they could probably find some stuff that was a little juicier than this, right? So that was one thing. But the other thing is, if this is information that is very dispersed, right? That doesn't fit together. It's not all coming from one department. It's just sort of an odd collection of seemingly random material. So what are our initial questions? We already talked about what's odd about the message. Seems like it's an insider attack. Does anyone think that you should reply to this message? No, not yet. Do you contact law enforcement at this point? I'm going to do a show of hands here. How many people think that you should contact law enforcement right now about this? Wow, very, very few people. Okay. And everyone else, I'll assume, says no. I'd love to go through the sort of the whys and the why nots in detail, but we'll quickly talk about it. The way this particular matter played out, as so many do. So that email came into the CEO of the company, and the CEO immediately forwarded it to the head of corporate security, not to InfoSec, right? And went to the sort of executive protection guy. And, ex-FBI, guess what he did? Called the FBI, called his buddy at the Bureau, right? Before legal knew anything about it, before anybody else in the company knew anything about it, okay? Now, for better or for worse, the agent that he called didn't have any idea what to do with it, and actually did give a little bit of a helpful read initially. What do you think the FBI said about that message? Yeah, that's not really a crime yet, right? Like, we don't know what this is. It's not blackmail yet. I mean, it looks like they're headed that direction, but, there's really nothing much to work with here. So for better or for worse, it was sort of a no harm, no foul situation with that contacting of law enforcement. Do you engage outside counsel, forensics firms, communications firms? Again, probably a little bit too early to do that, although our client did engage outside counsel right away. They were freaked out enough. I mean, this is, it doesn't get higher profile than this, right? The CEO is getting this message. So, there's already, the executive team is starting to ask questions. Have any statutory other notification requirements been triggered? I think we talked about that. Probably not yet, and that was the decision that was made. Is there a need to notify cyber insurance carrier? Definitely a question you want to ask early, but again, I think we're probably not quite to that point yet. And the same with document preservation obligations. You do want to start thinking about these things early, because as we all know, some of the information that you might have to preserve in response to potential regulatory action or litigation may not stick around. You got to take affirmative action to preserve that stuff. So what are the key investigative work streams that are coming out right at the top here? So first, you really want to identify source documents. So we've got 3 to work with right now. Where the heck are those? What were the source files that were used to create that PDF file, and who had access to them? You want to attempt to determine the full scope of the exposure. So, can we zero in on an attacker or some sort of entry vector, where we can try to figure out what else the attacker had access to? Again, if it's an insider, though, as we suspected at this time, that's a very difficult thing to do. Assess the potential impact of the documents were released. So there was a team already working on going through these, that PDF in detail, and just sort of, wargaming a little bit. Hey, what would happen to us if this were released to? I mean, I can't imagine WikiLeaks would publish it, but whatever, if it found its way onto the public internet in some way. Determine whether there is an active compromise. Of course, even though we think it's an insider, again, we gotta fight back against our jumping to conclusions, right? There could be somebody in your network right now, and of course, it could be an insider, it could be a former employee that left themselves a back door or something. But we can't rule out that there was there was an external actor involved. Monitor the open, deep, and dark web for documents and references to the attack, right? So we've got some keywords, some parameters we can use. We've got this PDF file. Let's make sure this stuff isn't already posted someplace. Let's make sure the attacker didn't stumble on this stuff someplace and now is, trying to exploit it. So immediately we started doing that. And then, really focusing a lot of resources on exploring this potential insider involvement. So at this point, we really are, we're trying to think through we're looking at access logs, we're getting lists of people that had access to the locations on the network where the documents were found. We did identify what we believed were the source documents pretty quickly. Each of them was found on different source systems, so there was no one location where we were hoping to find it all in a bundle someplace, but we did not. The results of the compromise assessment, so just determining whether the company was owned, is inconclusive. I mentioned though, because it was a very decentralized IT environment, the instrumentation on the network was pretty poor. The visibility was pretty poor. So not a lot of comfort that we got from the results of that. We did see some unusual communications with an IP address in a quote unquote bad neighborhood, so not associated with malicious activity. So it didn't set off any alerts at the time when the activity occurred, but in sort of dialing the sensitivity up a little bit, we were able to see these. Those probably aren't IPs that you want to see in your logs. But again, nothing that any of us wouldn't be able to find in our environment on any given Tuesday, right? Nothing really jumping out. No references to the documents found online and on the open, deeper, dark web. And we engaged a service to assist us with that process. So we start to draw these conclusions, and the FBI was, as I mentioned, not interested at all until the next message. So we've got another message from Harpooned to the CEO again. So this is day 5, right? This is 5 days after the initial message. Time to pay. Hello, I hope you now have had a chance to look at the package I sent last week and know that I am very serious. You are probably wondering what I want. Yes, we are. I've been thinking about that too. I know you've got plenty of money, so that shouldn't be an issue. I will want to be paid in Bitcoin though, so you will need to go buy some of that. I want 1,000 Bitcoin deposited in 2 different wallets, 500 in each, and then provided the wallet addresses. I'll give you 1 week from today to make the deposits, or I start releasing information. Okay, so how does this new message affect our response work streams? Does this really change anything? Well, how many people at this point would contact law enforcement? Yep, more. Well, it's still a minority though. How many people definitely would not contact law enforcement yet? Just curious. So there's probably a lot of undecideds. Okay. So the decision was made to contact law enforcement at this point. And based on this message, the FBI was quite interested in pursuing. Why do you think that? Well, number one, now we have a blackmail attempt here. The other thing the FBI got really excited about, and the last speaker was talking about this. Oh, they want Bitcoin, right? Because Bitcoin, as a lot of people don't realize, it is not anonymous, and the FBI has had great success in, sort of once they have these wallet IDs, using those and using the payment and recovery of money from Bitcoin wallets process to identify attackers. So they're now really excited, all right, for better or for worse. The FBI is now quite excited about this. Actually, a couple other questions there. There are a couple other points. I know I have limited time here to get through this, so I'm just going to have to state some of the conclusions here. There was discussion around, okay, is it time to start buying Bitcoin, right? Do we need to start assembling that? You can't go buy that much Bitcoin. And by the way, at the time, actually, I've been adjusting the number of Bitcoins to sort of keep the dollar figure around what it was at the time. This is about $3 million. $3 million is what they were looking for. So, again, enough to get the FBI's attention, definitely enough to get the executives' attention. Although I would say it was a big enough company, they were kind of like, if we could get out of this whole thing for $3 million, done and done, right? But, what we kept explaining to them is there's no way you can ever really be sure they're gone. And if, they won't go through all that logic, but not a lot of incentives to pay up here. So think about what to do to prepare for the worst. And in the midst of trying to make all these decisions, the FBI calls us and says, we're coming tomorrow. And we want to talk. We've got a bunch of questions, et cetera, et cetera. So what happened at that FBI meeting? The email address had been provided to the FBI, no surprise, absolutely no record of it anywhere, most likely created specifically for this attack. The Bitcoin wallets were not known to law enforcement. By the way, why 2 wallets? If you lose one, you still got the other, sort of limits your loss. Another theory, again, this is, 2 people. 2 people. So that's where we started to think. And again, you're fighting your human mind. Oh my God, there's 2 of them, right? Is it one current employee, one sophisticated outside person? It just starts to add all this complexity to it. So we have these 2 wallets. Nothing to go on with the 2 wallets. They don't appear at any of the FBI's databases. So the FBI comes in. They want to know about any difficult employee separations in recent months. Okay. They want the company to respond with an offer to make a payment. They want the company to, when they respond, include a tracking beacon in an attachment. And they want an update on the forensic investigation that's been going on inside the company. So let's go through these one by one. First of all, when all these questions come up, there was a discussion with the FBI in the room. Before a public company especially is going to start turning over information to the FBI, one question the lawyers asked was, do you guys have a subpoena? Right? Should we be asking you for a subpoena? Like, this is all voluntary. We called you. Why are you all of a sudden, asking for all this information? So first of all, one little practice tip, the FBI really doesn't like it when you tell them to come back with a subpoena. So we didn't do that. But even that it was brought up, they were visibly annoyed, right, that would even come up. And why is that? Because it's a pain for them. They got to go and they got to go talk to supervisors, and they got to go to the U.S. Attorney's office, and it's a pain. And also, they were kind of like, you called us. Do you want our help or not? Right? You can't have it both ways, right? And that I've had that conversation many times in different cases where that's and it's fair, right? Do you want us to help you? If so, we need some information. So you've really got to ask yourself coming into these meetings, right? What do you want from the FBI? What can the FBI give you that you can't get by yourself? Now, in this case, there was some information, right? We had this email, we had the Bitcoin wallets. Maybe there were other companies that were being attacked at the same time, similar sort of processes. So there were enough reasons to go to the FBI, but it's a two-way street. They are going to want information from you. They asked the company to respond with an offer to make a down payment to buy some time. The company decided that they would do that. The FBI asked the company to include a tracking beacon in the attachment. There was a lot of discussion about this. We did decide to do it, but what's the downside of that? You could be kicking a hornet's nest, right? If you're dealing with this, if they are sophisticated on the other side, they detect that you're trying to mess with them. First of all, it's pretty much a dead giveaway that law enforcement's involved. Could send the whole thing into a death spiral, right? The FBI asked for an update on the compromise assessment. That was something the company did not share. There was too much information there that was not relevant. Obviously, compromise assessment of the environment is a huge exercise. So we're very selective in the information that we decided to show. So the reply. Bob Ishmael, the general counsel of Pequod, call me Bob. I'm the general counsel, will be taking responsibility for communications with you on behalf of the company, so please direct future messages to me. We need more time to make payment arrangements. There are a number of approvals we need to get internally. We need to work with our bank to figure out the best way to acquire Bitcoins. It's not easy to buy that much Bitcoin in one shot, so I'll have to break up the purchases. To show that we're working in good faith, please see the attached screenshot from Coinbase explaining their limit on daily Bitcoin purchases, which they do have. We'll need at least 30 days to get this figured out, so there's no way we're going to have it. And here we're on day 8. The demand came on day 5, so we're a few days into the time period already. We may be willing to make an initial payment as a further showing of good faith. We ask that you show your good faith by sharing the totality of the data that you have with us. Okay. So that was the response. Anybody have any comments about that response? Good, bad, otherwise? Ambitious. Yeah. But the answer is no until you ask. So, and I can tell you, this is one of those messages that there were probably 135 man hours put into crafting this email, right? It's one of these things where you have 15 people on a conference call trying to craft this. And what I left out to protect the innocent is there was a major typo right in the middle of the thing. It was awesome. So that message goes out. We're now 2 days away from D-Day, basically. No response from the attacker yet. We've been doing our insider investigation. We identified 6 current employees, 2 former employees who visited WikiLeaks, right? That was one of the things we looked at. Well, they mentioned WikiLeaks, sort of a stretch, but not something that a lot of people are visiting. So we did find some people who were accessing WikiLeaks, and a couple of them are former employees. Identified 35 employees who regularly visit websites that track Bitcoin, right? So somebody who's paying attention to the price of Bitcoin. There was an overlap of 5 employees between those two groups. Again, we're stretching a little, but remember, we have very little to work with here. 2 of those 5 left the company in the last 6 months, 1 voluntarily and 1 terminated for poor performance. Okay. And those 2 employees worked in different departments at the time, but when they started with the company, they worked together in the IT group, entry-level IT positions. Okay, more and more interesting. And devices assigned to both employees were associated with some of those communications that we saw to these weird IPs. Whoa, okay, did we solve it? Do we have, did we make our case? I will tell you that the majority of our team thought yes. I am paid to be skeptical, so I actually didn't, and we still don't know who it was, right? I already told you the conclusion, so maybe it was these guys. I was not convinced that was all. As you can see, it's all circumstantial stuff. We're really stretching to try to pull this together. So questions: do we conduct employee interviews? Do we talk to these people? Do we talk to their managers? Do we pull their email? Do we start to look at their activities over time? Do we pull their HR files for the separated employees? Do you share the names of the FBI? How many people would share that was one of the most sensitive questions we had. How many people would give these names over to the FBI and say, what do you know about these guys? Anyone else? How many people definitely would not? Okay, so and then a lot of undecideds. This was a big discussion, and the initial decision was no, because you got to think about this. Like, once the FBI has your name, they've got that forever, right? So it can have consequences for people, and you got to take that into account. And given the evidence we have, we didn't have a high degree of certainty these were the guys. We didn't have any affirmative proof. But what made us comfortable finally turning them over, which we did, was that when we started looking back at the communications and the other things, both of these employees, before they left, emailed a ton of stuff to their personal email accounts. Now, and believe me, that was another moment where we got them. Not one of the files that was included in that PDF was in the set of files that was emailed out. Okay, so more circumstantial evidence, but at least there we're well, okay, these guys are bad guys anyway. We've now seen that they did steal stuff from us, even if it wasn't this stuff. So that's sort of what put the company over the edge and decided to give the names to the FBI. Do you do anything to prepare for the deadline in 2 days? Other than kind of freak out? There wasn't a heck of a lot we could do except, chew our fingernails. Make sure that the corporate communications team was ready and that, we were slowly sort of cascading information down in the organization as we approached the deadline, because if this hits and the papers pick it up or whatever, we wanted to be ready for all that. The FBI comes back. Okay, day 12. Okay, so this is essentially this is D-Day, right? This is the day that the attacker that we were supposed to pay. We have not heard anything else from the attacker. The FBI comes back. They've identified some leads and they've opened an investigation. Great. All right. So what do you got? They didn't tell us anything. Well, did you find anything on the guys? All they told us was they didn't have enough for a warrant. Okay, not helpful. They shared very little information about what they're doing. And we even said, well, have you gone and talked to the guys? They wouldn't tell us. They wouldn't tell us whether they'd talked to the witnesses. We asked them whether they'd interviewed any current employees or any managers, anybody. They wouldn't tell us whether they talked to our own employees. They would not indicate whether the beacon had been activated. They wouldn't tell us whether they had a suspect or not, and they were very polite about it. And they did feel kind of bad, but they just said we just can't. Basically they don't know who they can trust and who they can't trust. So you just have to. And this is typical of what I've seen from the FBI in the past, and again very understandable. They requested all available activity log data for employees named previously. They asked the company not to block those IP addresses. We had actually blocked them. They asked us to unblock them. And they didn't have any other updates at this time. How do we respond to all of that? And I think past time. So we did not unblock the IP. And basically, this is the state where we sort of left it. And you fast forward, day 45, right? So we're weeks later now, right? And we kept working to see if we could get more evidence on these guys or other indications. Nothing, no additional messages from the attacker, no updates from the FBI, nothing conclusive on the internal investigation. Communications to that weird IP completely stopped, even attempts, right? We were able to see attempts, no attempts. No sign of compromised data on the web. The compromise assessment was inconclusive, no confirmed evidence of data exfiltration. Wow, how unsatisfying is that? Now, what I like to think is that we got close enough to the adversary that they got spooked and they went to ground. But honestly, it was well over a year before anybody was really feeling like that they weren't going to come back tomorrow. I know I'm over time. This deck is available online for the closeout questions. That was an interesting closeout as well. How much of this do you want to document if it comes back to bite you? So what I'd advise everybody to do, take a scenario like this and run it. Run it in your organization. It's kind of fun, and it really gets you to think about things outside of what you normally think about in an attack simulation scenario. So thanks everybody. If you're fascinated by this story, I'm talking more about it on Wednesday over in the law track. So thanks very much, everybody.